One's the job, one's the truth. Sign whichever you can live with.
You already know the truth.
You can take the pen or leave it. Nobody's watching but me.
There's a boy at the glass. He's watching too.
I put my judgment on your name.
You already answered the question.
So tell me plain, will you let yourself be counted?
The executive floor was dark. Every light killed but one lamp burning gold on a desk, the size of a dinner table. Vivian Crane slid 2 sheets of paper across the glass toward the man in the gray work shirt. 2 signatures waited at the bottom of them. Hers on one, his on the other. Behind the wall of windows, a boy stood in the hallway with a math book pressed to his chest, watching his father the way you watch a bridge in a high wind. Ray Delgado's tool belt lay open on the carpet, the wrenches gone quiet. Vivian folded her hands to hide the tremble in them and asked the only question left to ask. And for a man who had spent 3 years making himself small on purpose, the truth turned out to be the heaviest tool he owned. Stories like this one are told slow, and they tend to stay with you long after. If it settles somewhere behind your ribs, stay with me a while. Let me carry you back to where it began, a few weeks before that lamp and those 2 signatures, to a building that emptied out every night at 6 and forgot who stayed behind to keep it running. Ray came on at 5:30, after the elevators emptied. He pushed his cart down carpet that cost more per yard than he made in an hour, and nobody on that floor could have told you his name. He liked it that way, mostly. A handyman is a kind of furniture. You notice him only when something breaks. In the small break room off the loading dock, his son Danny sat with a textbook and a flashlight, doing algebra until the shift was done, because a boy of 14 with no mother left at home was safer where his father could see him. There had been a man named Hank once, a foreman on a job site outside Bakersfield, who taught Ray more than how to read a wiring diagram. Hank had big scarred hands and a quiet mouth, and he used to say the loudest man in the room is always the one with the least. So Ray learned to keep his knowing folded up inside him, like a clean rag in a back pocket, ready, unbragged about. It cost him raises. It cost him credit. It never once cost him his peace. He carried something else, heavier than the tool belt. 3 years back, in a hospital room, Elena had held his wrist with what strength she had left and made him promise. She made him promise he would let himself be seen again, that he would not disappear into the walls and the after-hours quiet. He had said yes to give her peace. Then he had spent every day since breaking it, one silent shift at a time. Vivian Crane ran the company from the corner office and stayed later than anyone, because home was a house with too many rooms and no one to fill them. She was sharp, exact, respected, and tired down to the marrow. When she signed her name, she pressed the pen too hard to steady the shaking in her hand, and she kept that shaking a secret, the way some people keep debt. The board saw a titan. Nobody saw the woman who used to build things with her own fingers, and could not anymore. She had learned to fold her hands the way a person folds away something broken, out of sight. Between them stood a man named Grant, her chief of staff, who wore suits that fit sharp, and spoke in the smooth, certain way of a person who has never once been caught. It was Grant who found Ray in the corridor that Tuesday night, holding a laptop at arm's length as though it had bitten him. "It's dead," Grant said. "She dropped it, spilled something, who knows. IT's gone home. Just get rid of it. Wipe it, toss it, whatever you people do." He handed it over without meeting Ray's eyes and walked off, already talking into his phone, the way a man does when he wants a thing gone. Ray took the laptop down to the maintenance room, where the light was honest. He set out drivers, a magnetic tray, a soft cloth. This was the part of him nobody credited, the part that could coax a drowned machine back to life. Handyman on the badge, master technician in the fingers. He had rebuilt server rooms and Ray's data companies had wept over losing, and every time the thanks had gone to the man in the suit beside him. The board was corroded where something sweet had spilled. Coffee, by the smell of it. He cleaned it, dried it, moved the drive to a bench reader, and began the slow, patient work of pulling files off a disk that had given up. Line by line, the data came back, folders resurrecting out of the dark. He was not looking for anything. He was only doing the job right, because doing it wrong was a thing he did not know how to do. He hummed something low and tuneless, an old song of Elena's he could not have named. Then a single image finished loading, and Ray went very still. It was a photograph, old enough to have been scanned from paper. A young woman at a workbench, safety glasses pushed up into her hair, a soldering iron in one steady hand, and a curl of silver smoke rising past a face lit with pure, unguarded joy. He knew the face. It was thinner now, harder now, but it was hers. It was Vivian Crane, 20 years and a whole life ago, back when her hands did not shake and she made things instead of decisions. Someone had buried this file in a folder, inside a folder, inside a folder, named so it would never be found by accident. She had hidden it, from everyone, maybe from herself. Ray did not open anything else in that folder. A man's private grief was not his to rummage through. He copied the photo to the restored drive, whole and clean, and left it where she could find it. He told himself that was the end of it, but the recovery had swept up more than pictures, and as he verified the last of the files, a spreadsheet flagged itself as corrupted, and his eye caught on a column of numbers before his good sense could stop it. Payments, vendor accounts he half recognized, and a name he did recognize, threaded through them again and again like a splinter under skin. He should have closed it. He nearly did. But he was a man who could not leave a broken thing broken, and this was broken in a way that had nothing to do with spilled coffee. Money was leaving the company in small, clever amounts, routed through vendors that did no work, and every path led back through the same office, Grant's office. Ray sat with that knowledge in the honest light, and understood exactly why the man had told him to wipe the machine and throw it in the trash. He was still sitting there when the door opened without a knock. Vivian stood in it, coat over one arm, because she had come back for the laptop she'd been told was ruined. She saw the drive on the reader, the tools laid out, and on the screen, restored and bright, the photograph of a girl she had spent 2 decades trying to forget she had been. The color went out of her face. "Where did you get that?" she said, and her voice was flat and dangerous and afraid all at once. "It was on the drive," Ray said. "I brought it back with the rest. I didn't go looking for it." He kept his hands where she could see them. "I didn't delete anything either. Everything you had is here, better than it was." She crossed the room and looked at the photograph the way you look at a wound in a mirror. Her jaw worked. Her hand, the shaking one, rose halfway to the screen and stopped. "You had no right," she said, but there was no force in it. There was only the ache of a person caught remembering. Ray watched her try and fail to look away. "No, ma'am," he agreed quietly. "I could put it back where it was hidden, if you want. Or take it off entirely. Your call. It's your life, not mine." He reached to close the lid, slow, giving her time. That single courtesy, the offer to unsee what he had seen, did something to her face that anger never could have. Something loosened at the corner of her mouth, and then tightened again, because she was not a woman who let things loosen for long. "Who are you?" she said, not the words on his badge. The real question underneath. A janitor doesn't recover a dead drive. Ray lifted one shoulder, the way Hank used to. "I fix what's in front of me." He did not say master technician. Hank's voice was in his ear, and Ray had never wanted to stand up over other men and shout what he knew. He gathered his tools and let her think whatever she needed to think. But the way she did not leave right away stayed with him after she was gone. She took the laptop and left without another word, her heels quick and uneven on the marble. Ray finished squaring away the bench. Then, because it was procedure, and because procedure had kept him honest his whole life, he filled out a service log. Machine, fault, action taken, anomalies noted. At the bottom of it, In the small, careful hand he'd used since trade school, he signed his name and the date and the time. He filed it in the maintenance system, one more paper in 10,000, and thought no more about it. He did not yet know that a signature on a timestamp can be the difference between a ruined man and a believed one. At home that night, the apartment was warm and small, and smelled of the beans he'd left simmering. Danny did his reading at the kitchen table, while Ray patched a leak under the sink for the third time, because the landlord would not. They talked about nothing, a test on Friday, new cleats they could not stretch to. Ray counted the money in the coffee can on top of the refrigerator, $40 and change, and put half of it back for the electric. Danny pretended not to see him do it. That was its own kind of love, the pretending. The next evening, crossing the executive floor with his cart, Ray found the corner office lit and Vivian still at her desk. He slowed without meaning to. She had the laptop open, and he could see, even from the door, the small bright square of the photograph glowing on the screen, not hidden 3 folders deep anymore, but sitting out where she could look at it. She caught him seeing it. For a half-second too long, neither of them looked away. Then she said, "Good night, Mr. Delgado," reading the name off his shirt, and he said good night and pushed the cart on, and his heart was doing something it had not done in 3 years. 2 nights after that, a fixture in the corner office began to hum and flicker. Ray brought his ladder up at 9, expecting an empty room. Vivian was still there, papers fanned across the glass. She waved him in without ceremony and went on working while he set the ladder and climbed. For a while, there was only the small, clean sound of his screwdriver and the turning of her pages. "You always work this late," he said finally, not quite a question, easing the old ballast free. "There's no one home to work early for," she said, and did not look up, and seemed surprised the words had left her. Then quieter, testing something. "You put that photograph back together." The girl at the bench. Ray fit the new part into place. "She had good hands," he said. "Steady. You can see it in how she's holding the iron." Vivian's pen stopped moving. She did not answer, but she did not send him away either. And when the light came back clean and white, she said, "Better," in a voice that meant more than the fixture. He carried his ladder out, and behind him she sat a long moment in the good new light, not working at all. For 2 days after, Ray said nothing about the numbers, and it sat in him like a stone in a boot. It was not his fight. He had a boy to raise and a job to keep, and men who stir up the powerful get swept out like dust. Once he stood outside the corner office with his knuckles raised, meaning to tell her plainly, and then a security guard rounded the corner whistling, and Ray lowered his hand and moved on. Danny felt it before he understood it. A boy who has lost one parent learns to read the other like weather. At supper, he watched his father chew the same bite too long and stare at nothing, and he said, "You in trouble at work, Dad?" Ray said no. Quick, too quick. And Danny let it go the way he let the coffee can go, out of love and out of fear. But that night, through the wall, the boy heard his father not sleeping, heard the springs of the couch shift and shift again, and something in his chest learned to be afraid. Grant, in a building that thought it was empty, was not sleeping either. He had a habit of watching the systems, and the maintenance log told him a machine he'd ordered destroyed had instead been fully recovered, every file intact, by a handyman with no business reading any of it. He read Ray's tidy little service note twice. Anomalies noted. 2 words, filed in the open, where any auditor with a pulse might one day trip over them. Where another man might have felt fear, Grant felt only the cold arithmetic of a person deciding what a problem was worth. Then he began to plan. He found Ray by the freight elevator the next evening, all warmth and easy hands. "You did good work on that laptop," Grant said. "Real good. Almost too good, for a guy who pushes a cart." He let that sit. "Here's the thing. Some sensitive material may have crossed that screen. Client data, the kind of thing that gets a company sued, and a man like you charged with a felony he can't afford to fight." He smiled. "So, we're going to agree you saw nothing, aren't we?" Ray looked at him for a long moment. "I saw a photograph," he said, "and I saw a spreadsheet that didn't add up." He did not raise his voice. He did not lower it either. I'm not going to lie about either one if somebody asks me straight. That was the wrong answer, and Ray knew it even as he gave it, and gave it anyway. Grant's smile did not change, but his eyes did. You should think about your kid, he said softly, and walked away. And by the following night, the trap was already built. It came at the end of the shift, in the lobby, in front of God and everyone. 2 security men Ray had shared coffee with for a year came to him with their faces closed and told him he was being walked out. The story, already circulating, was that the handyman had been caught pulling confidential files off an executive laptop, that data was missing, that his access was revoked pending investigation. They asked to see his bag. They emptied his lunch cooler onto the marble, a sandwich in wax paper, an apple, a thermos that rolled and rang against the stone. Ray stood with his hands loose at his sides and let them, because fighting would only feed the story. And across the lobby, by the visitor's bench, his son had come down early to walk home with him, and saw all of it. Danny's face was the worst thing Ray had ever seen, worse than the hospital, worse than the grave. To watch your father made small in a bright public room, and to be too young to stop it. Near the revolving doors, a teenager sat waiting for his mother, who cleaned the offices on the lower floors. The boy had his phone up, the way boys do, filming the strange commotion without quite knowing why. The security men, the emptied cooler, and Grant, who had come down to watch, and could not help murmuring an instruction to the guards. A small, satisfied slip of the mouth caught clear in the glow of a 14-year-old screen. The rain started as they walked home, and neither of them had a coat. They sat on the stoop of the building because the stairwell light was out, and the apartment felt too much like a place a man goes to be beaten. Danny finally said it, quiet under the drum of the water. "Did you do it, Dad?" And it did not matter that the boy asked. What mattered was that he had to ask at all. "No," Ray said, "I didn't." He put his arm around his son's thin shoulders and felt him shaking, cold or fear, or both. "I found something a powerful man wanted buried, that's all." And this is what happens to people who find those things, sometimes. Ray thought about Elena's hand on his wrist and the promise he'd made and broken, to let himself be seen, and he understood with a bitter clarity that being seen was exactly what had ruined him. But then Danny said, in a small, hard voice, "It's not right." And Ray heard in it the man his son was becoming, and knew that if he swallowed this, he would be teaching that man the wrong lesson forever. "No," Ray said again, differently this time. "It's not." He did not know yet how a handyman fights a chief of staff and a whole loyal board. He only knew he had stopped intending to lie about the spreadsheet, and that a man's silence should never buy another man's crime. If you have ever been made small in a bright room, you already know how this weighs. Stay with me. It turns, I promise you, it turns. Across the city, Vivian Crane could not sleep either. The photograph was on her laptop, restored, and she had opened it 4 times and closed it 3. The girl at the workbench looked back with steady hands and a whole future. It shamed her, how much she had wanted to bury that girl. And it was the photograph, oddly, that made her finally open the spreadsheet the handyman had mentioned before Grant swept him out the door. She was an engineer before she was ever a chief executive, and a person who has built things can read a schematic of theft as easily as a circuit. She traced the first payment. It led to a vendor. The vendor led to an account. The account led to another, and the money grew smaller and smoother as it went, the way water finds the crack you cannot see. Her second monitor still held the photograph, the girl with the soldering iron, watching her older self work. Somewhere near 2 in the morning, her hand began to shake so badly she had to set the pen down and press both palms flat to the desk. Every road, when she followed it, led back to the office 3 doors down from her own. Grant's office, her chief of staff. The man who signed her calendar and stood at her shoulder in every photograph. Her heart went cold, and then furious. And then, because she was careful, she went looking for who had first laid a hand on the truth. She found the service log. Machine, fault, action taken, anomalies noted. And at the bottom, a name in a careful trade school hand. with a date and a timestamp from the night before Grant had ever accused anyone of anything. Ray Delgado. The handyman had recorded the anomaly, signed it, and filed it in the open system where anyone could read it, hours before there was any theft to frame him for. A thief does not log his own discovery in daylight and sign his name to it. Only an honest man does that. Only a man with nothing to hide and nothing to gain. Vivian looked at the photograph, and then at the log, and she reached for her keys. She got his address from personnel and drove herself, which she never did. She stood in the rain on the stoop of a building with a broken stairwell light, a woman in a coat that cost more than the rent, and she raised her hand to knock and stopped, listening to a television murmuring and the low answer of a man. She almost turned around. Her whole life had been built on trusting no one. Then she knocked 3 times and heard the murmuring stop. Ray opened the door and did not hide his surprise. Behind him, Danny appeared, and then hung back in the way of a boy who has learned to be wary of anyone from that building. Vivian stood dripping under the weak hallway bulb and found that all the speeches she had rehearsed in the car had left her. What came out instead was plain, and it was the truest thing she had said aloud in years. "Tell me the truth about what you saw," she said, "the whole of it, and I will believe you over my entire board." It was an extraordinary thing to offer, and they both knew it. She was laying her judgment against 12 powerful people and staking it on a man in a work shirt. And here was the moment he could have ended his smallness forever, could have named himself, listed his certifications, made himself unanswerable on credentials alone. He didn't. He heard Hank in the quiet, and he simply told her what he saw. The vendors that did no work, the amounts, the routing, the office they all came home to. He told it in order, without heat, without embellishment, the way you report a fault so the next man can fix it. When she asked how he could be certain, he did not say, "Because I am the best technician you have ever hired." He said, "Because I recovered the drive, and the numbers don't lie, and I wrote it all down that night, before anybody was accused of anything. Look at the log. My name's on it." "I saw your name," she said. "That's why I'm standing in your rain." She studied him, the shirt with his own name stitched over the heart, the boy behind him. "You could have come to me, asked for something, a reward, a settlement, after what they did to you in that lobby. Why didn't you?" Ray considered it honestly, the way he considered everything. "Because there wasn't anything in it for me," he said. "You needed the truth. I had it." He was not being noble. He genuinely did not understand why a person would want a price for doing right. That, more than the log, more than the numbers, was what undid the last of Vivian Crane's guard. Her eyes went past him, to the wall, where a small framed photograph sat on a shelf, a woman, laughing, gone. "That's your wife," she said. Not a question. Ray nodded. "She made me promise I'd let people see me again," he said, surprising himself. "I haven't been very good at keeping it." Vivian thought of a girl at a workbench with steady hands, buried 3 folders deep. "I know something about hiding the best of yourself," she said quietly. "I've been doing it longer than you have." She looked at his hands. Then, and he looked at hers, and she did not bother to still the tremble this time. "I used to build things," she said. "Before this shook so bad I couldn't hold a fine tip. I put that girl in a folder and told myself she was dead, so it wouldn't hurt to have lost her." Ray said nothing wise. He only said, "She's not dead. I saw her light up on a screen, steadiest thing in the room." And Vivian Crane, titan of the corner office, had to press the back of her wrist hard against her mouth. Danny, watching from the kitchen, quietly set 2 more cups on the table. They made a plan at that table over coffee that was too strong, while Danny listened from the doorway pretending to do homework. There would be a board meeting Thursday, called to formalize the investigation into the handyman's theft, and Grant would be there, certain and smooth, expecting a coronation. Vivian would let him have his stage. Because a person only shouts that confidently, she was beginning to understand, when they believe no one has counted the money. And she had counted it, twice, until her hand ached. Thursday came bright and cold, The board sat around a table of pale wood, 11 of them and Vivian. Grant stood at the head of it with a slideshow and a story, painting Ray Delgado as a common thief who had violated executive systems and had to be dealt with firmly to protect the firm. He was good. He was very good. He walked them through the access logs he had chosen to show, the flagged files, the handyman's unusual technical skill, which he made sound less like a virtue and more like a weapon. He spoke of trust and vigilance, and around the table the powerful heads began to nod, because he was one of them and Ray was the man who fixed their thermostats. Vivian let him build it. She sat with a folder closed in front of her, and her shaking hand flat upon it, saying nothing, and her silence began, she saw, to be read the wrong way. A woman across the table, Pruitt, careful with the firm's name, spoke first. "Vivian, I have to ask. You called this meeting, and now you sit there like you'd rather be anywhere else. If there's a hole in Mr. Grant's account, this is the hour to say so, not after the lawyers are involved." A second voice joined her, a banker named O.C. who watched Vivian's flat hand on the folder. "You look like a woman who's already made up her mind against the room. We'd all like to know on what." The doubt she had wagered everything on had turned, for one long moment, to face her. It was the exact cost she had known she was paying, and it still landed hard. To be doubted by the people she had spent 20 years earning. She felt the old instinct to fold her hands and disappear the tremble. Instead, she left it where they could see it, and let Grant finish his last confident sentence. And then she said, evenly, "Before we vote on ruining a man, I'd like to show the board a document." She opened the folder and slid the maintenance log into the middle of the table, and beside it a printout of the recovered spreadsheet, the numbers laid bare. This anomaly was recorded and signed the night before Mr. Grant reported any theft, by the man Mr. Grant accused. A thief does not sign his discovery and file it where anyone can read it. Grant's smile held, barely. "That's a maintenance worker's scribble," he said, and gave a small, easy laugh toward Pruitt, an invitation to join him in the sensible view. A handyman couldn't possibly understand financial routing. He wouldn't know a vendor ledger from a grocery list. Someone coached him. Someone with a grievance and access and a reason to embarrass this office. He let the accusation sit near Vivian without landing on her by name, which was cleverer, and Osei glanced between them, weighing it. For a breath, the room tilted back toward Grant, because a room full of important people would rather doubt a stranger than one of their own. Then the door opened, and a young woman came in. Rena, from the outside audit team Vivian had called in secret 2 nights before. She set a tablet on the table. On it played a video, shaky and vertical, filmed through a lobby's glass by a boy waiting for his mother. It showed the emptied cooler, the closed faces of the guards, an innocent man's dignity taken in a bright room, and it showed Grant, leaning close to the security men, murmuring an instruction with a small, satisfied slip of the mouth, his own voice caught clean, telling them to be sure the handyman left with nothing, while his own hand slid a small drive into his own pocket. The room went silent, the way a struck bell goes silent, still full of the sound that was just there. Rena did not let it sit long. She set a second folder beside the tablet and said, plainly, "The signature on that log is genuine, and it predates the accusation. The routing matches what our team has already begun to confirm. 3 of these vendors have no registered address, that is all I came to say." And she stepped back, because the numbers did not need her to shout for them, and neither did Ray. Pruitt drew the printout toward her, and her careful face changed as she followed the columns down with one finger, the way you follow a crack, to where the wall will fail. Every face at the table turned toward the back of the room, where Ray had been quietly asked to stand near the door, cap in his hands. An older man near the middle, a founder with a plain voice who had said nothing the whole meeting, looked at him for a long moment and then said, "Son, is that true? You found all this?" There was a beat, and Ray, who had made himself small for 3 long years, stood a little straighter under all those eyes, and did the hardest, simplest thing. "Yeah," he said, "I did." 2 words, the loudest thing he had ever said, and he said them soft. Grant tried once more. He turned to the table with his hands open and began, "This proves nothing except that a disgruntled," and got no further, because Osei set down his cup with a small hard click and said, "Sit down, Grant." And something in the way the room had shifted told even Grant that the vote he'd come for was gone. The audit did the rest over the following hour: the phantom vendors, the routed accounts, the pocketed drive. Security walked him out that afternoon, and this time it was the man in the sharp suit crossing the marble with a box of his belongings, and no one emptied it onto the floor, because Vivian Crane did not believe in doing to a guilty man what he had done to an innocent one. She watched him go and felt no triumph, only the tiredness of a person who has finally set down a weight she carried too long. When the room had cleared, she found Ray by the freight elevator he'd been walked to that ugly night. She said the true thing. "You could have shamed me in there, named yourself the genius, made them all feel like fools. You had every right." Ray shook his head. "Wouldn't have fixed anything," he said. "And I wasn't in it to win. I was in it to be honest with you." Danny was waiting downstairs, and when he saw his father come out of that elevator, with his head up, and the woman who ran the whole building walking beside him like an equal, something in the boy's shoulders let go. Vivian crouched a little to his eye level, an executive kneeling on the lobby marble. "Your father," she told him, "is the most honest man in this building. I wanted somebody to say that to you out loud." Danny looked at Ray, and Ray looked at the floor, and for once did not mind being seen. She offered him the technician's position openly, with the title and the pay he had been quietly worth for years, and Ray surprised them both by hesitating, not from pride, from the old habit of smallness, the fear that being seen was the thing that got you hurt. "I've been invisible a long time," he admitted. "It's safer." Vivian understood that better than anyone alive. "It is," she agreed. "It's also lonely, and it's a lie, and we've both told it long enough." She held out her hand, the shaking one, and did not hide it. "Take the job. Let yourself be counted." He took the job. He took her hand, too, and neither of them let go quite as fast as the moment required. The weeks after did not rush anything, because neither of them was a person who trusted fast. But the girl at the workbench came out of her folder and onto a small stand on the corner of Vivian's desk, in daylight, where the whole board could see the soldering iron and the joy. Vivian said it was a reminder of who she'd been. Ray thought it was a promise to who she might be again. He never said so. One gray afternoon, he came up to the corner office and set a fine-tipped iron on her desk, a coil of solder, and a scrap of practice board. Vivian looked at it, then at her own hands, and said, "I can't," in a voice that had a whole history in it. "You can try," Ray said. "Nobody's watching but me, and I've seen worse hands than yours." He plugged the iron in and did not hover. She picked it up, and it wandered, the tip trembling over the copper, and she made a bad joint, a cold gray blob, and muttered at it under her breath, the way she never let herself in meetings. Then she made another, less bad. Then she touched the hot tip to her thumb by mistake and hissed and laughed, a real one, laughed until her eyes went wet and she had to set the iron in its stand. "I burned myself," she said, wonderingly, pressing her thumb to her lips like a girl. "I haven't done that in 20 years. Ray handed her a wet paper towel and said nothing, because some things you don't say over, and she kept the scrapboard in her desk drawer after that, cold joints and all. Danny took to visiting the tech floor after school, doing his algebra at an empty bench near his father, and Vivian took to keeping snacks in her drawer that a 14-year-old might like, and pretending they were for guests. She came to their small, warm apartment for the beans that simmered all day, and the coffee can on the refrigerator stopped needing to be counted quite so carefully. It was not a thunderclap. It was a slow thaw, two people learning to dig each other back out of the walls they had hidden in. He had promised Elena he would let himself be seen again, and for 3 years he had failed her, and now, without meaning to, he had kept it, not by boasting, not by standing up over anyone. He had kept it by telling one guarded woman the plain truth when he had nothing to gain, and letting her look at him while he did it. Some nights, drying the last cup at the sink while Vivian read to Danny in the other room, he would glance at Elena's photograph on the shelf and feel, quietly, that she would have been glad. Years later, when Danny told the story to a girl he wanted to impress, he always ended it the same way, with the thing the plain-voiced founder muttered as he watched Grant's world collapse and the handyman stand up straight at last. "That fellow," the old man had said, shaking his head, "helped her when he had nothing in it for himself." You don't see that anymore, and Danny would smile, because he saw it every day, across a kitchen table, in a house that had finally filled its too many rooms. These stories are made with love. If this one stayed with you, subscribe. That is all I ask.